This video is brought to you in part by the patrons of the Lazy Eyebrow, and from the comments and watch time from viewers like you. Thank you!
I'm coming! Don't hang up! Hello?
Optimus Prime. I'm happy to have reached you.
Fujiara, nice to hear from you again. How is the Nightbird restoration project coming?
Actually, that's what I was calling about.
Oh?
Rather than try and undo everything that Megatron did to her, I decided to start from scratch. So I based the new model on one of your Autobots and made the first Autobot ninja.
You don't think this might, backfire like it did last time?
That specifically is what I'm calling today. He's been installed with a learning algorithm. They want him to learn from the very best. I've already shipped him across town, and he should be arriving at your Ark any second now.
You did what now?
Optimus, did you order a new robot?
Oh, good. It sounds like he's there.
Alright, this is from Dr. Fujiara. He says it's a ninja, but it's based on one of us. He wants us to teach it how to defend itself.
Heh, ninja robot. I'm sure this will fare way better than the last one.
Well, open it up and let's see it.
Whoa! It looks like jazz! Whoa, this is unreal! I mean, it's not an identical remake. It seems to respect the original work while also being its own thing. What a fascinating display of creativity! Man, those curves! Those colors! This thing has character, man! So much potential! Man, I can't wait to see what this thing ends up becoming. Hey, Optimus? Optimus? Hey, where'd everybody go?
So you're stationed on Earth and partnered with RC? Yep, that's right. And that vehicle mode, simply stunning. I mean, it's nothing compared to me, but I know high class when I see it. Well, when you're busy looking for Decepticons, you better look good doing it.
What about my ninja doppelganger, everybody?
Nobody cares anymore, Jazz.
Well, I care. What's up, Alita?
Well, hello, YouTube. Greetings from the Lazy Eyebrow to another Jazz review. This time in a series I've yet to cover. This is the review for Transformers Animated Deluxe Jazz. Sort of had a weird history with this show. It came out when I was 18, and I had yet to watch anything Transformers by that point. They announced it was going to premiere, and I was interested. A few days later, a friend invited us to her house to watch the first Bayformers movie, and I absolutely loved that thing. Then I watched the pilot for Animated, and I thought that was awesome. But then a few episodes after that, my too old for child-friendly things teenage brain took over, and eventually my opinion became, this is pretty cringy, I'm just gonna stop watching. It wasn't until last year that I was convinced to give it an honest run that I actually sat down and watched the show, and my word, what a show! After I got through the hurdle of the first 5 or 6 episodes, coincidentally where I stopped watching, storylines really started tightening up, the voice work was some stellar stuff, references to previous work were plentiful and respectful while still being its own thing, and the new alt modes for some of the characters were fascinating. I mean, has Megatron ever been a helicopter since? And in standard fashion, as far as characters go, Jazz still gets to be one of the cooler characters. Somehow a collectible shop here in Moncton had one in a sealed package for $25, so naturally I bought my favorite character yet again in a show I had a new appreciation for. And that's where we are today. It's 2021, and welcome to a review for a 13-year-old toy fresh out of its packaging. Animated Jazz is an odd anomaly in my collection. I say that considering I have none of the other figures from the show in the collection. And for what it is, it's fantastic, but compared to everything else, it sorta sticks out. Animated was known for its very, very curvy aesthetics, and Jazz is no exception here. Everything is bubbly and curvy and round. Very, very round. Its faithfulness to its source material is remarkable, and I am not for 1 second downing it for that. Like for 2008, it's a toy that looks like it leapt straight off the screen and materialized itself in plastic form. If this was G1, I may have been annoyed at this a little bit, but considering Animated had no constraints of being based on real vehicles, this actually works in its favor, and that's awesome. As such, you get the huge front engine bay, the small cabin area, the rear fender fins. I'm not entirely sure why the artist added these to Jazz's alt mode, like some modern take on a vintage Cadillac, but as a sports car. I am certainly not complaining about that, though. This has style. Because as far as flare goes, this is like way up on the flare scale. Like, thank goodness Tuvok wasn't on the design team for Jazz's alt mode.
Computer, delete dynametric tail fins. What'd you do that for? We are not designing a hot rod, Lieutenant.
Speaking of just outright flare, though, I love the exhaust pipe ripping out the side of the vehicle mode. Like, it's just so dang cool. And that's what the vehicle mode says to me. That in the design space when making this alt mode, it feels like what was said constantly was, hey, you know what would be cool? Like, you have this really compact two-seater sports car with a big, huge aerodynamic front end, but it has a non-aerodynamic headlight flares at the top. Why? Because it looks cool, that's why. It's like an aloof Herbie. There's side view mirrors attached to the side, but they look like massive over-the-top bullets flying through the air attached to a car. Why? Because it's cool. We're going to add big exhaust pipes to the sides of the car. One pipe for 2 cylinders to give you some semblance that he isn't just a sports car, but one built for speed. Why? Because it's cool. We're going to add big doofy catalyte fins and bullet-style taillights to the rear fenders. Why? Because it's cool. And then we're going to give it to the coolest characters of them all. I mean, yeah.
You are a cool toy.
But that's not to say it doesn't have its references to the original G1, as animated often did. Not slavish forced references, mind you, but tasteful ones. Jazz is white with a blue stripe with a red center. I mean, they're not going for the full martini, nor should they, but it's nice to see the concept reference. Does he need the 4? No. But does he have the Elite Guard emblem on the front, not unlike how the G1 displayed the Autobot badge? Absolutely. And just in general, they did it in such a way that you look at it and say, yep, that's Jazz, while also doing its own thing, and I totally respect the way they went about designing this character. However, a totally unexpected G1 reference, specifically on the toys, the show didn't exactly do this, and for good reason, I'm sure this would be impossible to animate consistently, is the rims. Those are the original real-world 935's rims that were also seen in the G1 toy that are apparent here on the animated toy. This is insanely cool. Like, it's a small, insignificant detail they added in that really didn't need to, but it's such a cool nod regardless. For size comparison, G1 Jazz, Studio Series Jazz, Netflix Bumblebee, Earthrise Prowl, Studio Series Ratchet, and, I don't know, Kingdom Optimus Primal, because why not? So that was vehicle mode. In a word, it's cool. It's got a bunch of stuff going on that feels like it was put in for the sake of being cool, and for a character built around being the cool one, I am very much down for that. We'll be right back after these messages.
The Transformers will return after these messages. We now return to the Transformers.
Welcome back. Let's get into transformation. Start by opening up what might be considered the trunk. Then flip out his legs, followed next by his toes. Pull out the arms while simultaneously folding in the tires. Fold down this net flap. Rotate down the chest. Rotate around the forearm panels. Straighten out the arms, and you're done. And here we have animated Jazz. And what an interesting figure. I absolutely miss how simple and intuitive the transformations from that era were, while still nailing the look they were aiming for instead of the over-engineering I feel is sometimes done these days. One thing I've held, and still do to some extent, is not quite enjoying the proportions. And most of animated had this look to the robots, with like these average-sized legs, skinny thighs, waist and abs, leading up to this gargantuan chest and slender-looking arms, ending off with what's essentially a cruise ship for a chin. One might even say they had somewhat of an organic feel to the robots, which is ironic considering, well, you'll just have to watch the show if you haven't already. But all those issues aside, I eventually got used to it as just the aesthetic for the show. But yeah, absolutely, I will totally take the blocky robot look over this any day. That being said, credit where credit is due. I'm surprised how well they made this work for a toy, especially in 2008. Like, despite its simple transformation and weird proportions from the show, it absolutely nailed the look of an animated Jazz while still retaining a ton of functionality and visual style that just makes the overall package really appealing. Like, starting from the head, you've got that light-piped visor that was very apparent back in its era. Turning his head reveals that they've incorporated something that looks like giant headphones within his head sculpt as a reference to G1 Jazz's love for music. That little extra piece for the neck that flipped over to fill in what would have been a gap in the chest totally feels like they got near the end of designing, worked out the geometry of the transformation, saw that gap and went, whoops, well, there's a gap. You know, we could fix this by adding a little tiny piece in the existing chest, and hey, there, problem solved. It's simple, it's elegant, and it gives the chest a solid look. The headlights still totally remind me of a modern-day Beetle, but applied to a sports car. Those Cadillac fins end up on the knees, and I can't help but feel that those should rotate or something to be like missile launchers or something. Again, even in the show, that wasn't a thing, and the way the molding, it feels like it should rotate, but doesn't actually. And yeah, I could just bend the knee if I really want that playability effect, but it doesn't change the fact that I sort of wish they could for the added fun factor. Something I didn't really mention in the vehicle mode is that the legs here are just plain white, and this is the roof of the car. Within the animation, the red and blue stripe runs the whole length of the car, and I had intending on continuing the stripe myself in paint until I realized that this would become the legs. And then it made sense why it didn't come like this from the factory, and, well, striping on the hood serves its purpose, I guess. You kind of get the idea of what they were going for without it ruining the robot. Now, one really cool thing about Jazz is found in the forearms. The playability of this section alone is just superb. For instance, you can spin the sections back around and then rotate around the exhaust themselves, take out the exhaust and flip them the other way, and then Jazz has pseudo-Wolverine claws. Why? I don't have a dang clue. Probably because it's cool, though. However, flipping these back the way they were and moving them reveals that they're actually nunchucks. I miss this. I really miss this. Nowadays, it feels like the weapon accessories are included and you're expected to have a giant drawer full of plastic pieces that make up a fictional armory, and if you want vehicle mode integration, you get to make some sort of doofy battle mode. But back about a decade ago, it feels like the designers actually took the time to figure out some sort of integration to make it all functionally work, and these nunchucks are just so cool. I'm sure it exists out there somewhere, but I'll be honest, I don't think I can think of another figure that comes with nunchucks, let alone ones that form exhaust pipes. That is just so dang cool. I mean, as far as animating it in stop motion goes, it's a bit of a pain as it's on a string instead of something that can hold its own weight, like a wire or a joint or something, but the fact that it exists at all is just something else entirely. As far as articulation for the robot goes, though, the head is on a super weird swivel joint. If he wants to look left or right, he ends up craning his neck in all sorts of weird angles, and I'm not fond of it. The shoulders themselves jut out the back of the figure like a certain modern-day masterpiece release, but instead of suffering for it, Jazz makes it work. That being said, they're ball-jointed for a full spin and a cutout for a full outward movement. The elbow is double-jointed, and bicep rotation exists, and here's something kind of neat. The wrists are on a ball joint with an extra cutout for inward movement. Because of the way the shoulders are situated, he still can't bring his hands together to hold a sword like Drift can, or bring his hands together to try process over matter, but it still does make for some interesting poses that weren't otherwise available. He has ab rotation, which is something I think I enjoy more. Like, when you twist your torso, what actually spins? Your upper part of the body at the waist, or just your chest, arms, and head at the midsection gradually twisting to preserve your spine? My point is, the way it's been executed looks a little more realistic, and I appreciate that. Thighs are on ball joints for full outward, forward, and backward movement. Knees bend 180 degrees. Thighs swivel, and the littlest bit of toe movement. Of all the articulation and proportions, the legs are my least favorite part. The shins are 50% longer than the thighs, and the feet are for all intents and purposes static, making balancing a challenge. Like I was able to hit a crane pose. It looks great from the top, the legs look like a mess, and it took a full pound of sticky tack to get it to hold. Kneeling is also a weird oddity of a mess. Regardless, he can still hit a bunch of other poses, so all in all, it's not bad. For size comparison, G1 Ricochet, Reveal the Shield Jazz, Power of the Primes Jazz, and Studio Series Jazz. As far as Jazz figures go in terms of deluxe, he's definitely the tallest. Other size comparisons include Netflix Bumblebee, Combiner Wars Groove, Earthrise Hoist, Earthrise Ratchet with a newly finished custom work done to it, Earthrise Optimus Prime, Siege Omega Supreme, Kingdom Elite Arachnia, Studio Series Dinobot Grimlock, and Kingdom Not Grimlock Dinobot. So that was my review for Transformers Animated Deluxe Jazz. For its time, it was such a cool toy that still holds up when compared to modern day releases. It's a simple, elegant figure with loads of fun involved in the design process that looks absolutely animation accurate, and at the end of the day, it's another Jazz I'm happy to have in my collection. This has been the Lazy Eyebrow. Well, this review kind of came out of nowhere, didn't it? Didn't expect to be making a review this week on a nearly 13-year-old toy, but that's how the cookie crumbles, I guess. If you liked this review, I would totally appreciate if you liked or commented or subscribed, and I would super appreciate any of those that wanted to support on the Patreon side of things, but that's up to you. I'm not forcing you to do anything. So where we're going next from here, I feel like it's high time we talked about some Datsuns from the Earthrise series. went on about a year how much more I liked their design, and then I just never covered them, which is, I guess, par for the course of my channel. But hey, we're gonna go for it next. So yeah, Earthrise Datsun's next. Just 2 of them though. I'm not gonna go for all of them, just to kind of, you know, make videos a little shorter. I feel like I liked this one a little shorter this time instead of the 30 minutes this has kind of been getting towards, and that's just a little bit on the ridiculous side, isn't it? So until then, we shall see you in the next review. This has been the Lazy Eyebrow.